Welcome, everyone, to Monday Match Analysis. I'm Gill Gross. Carlos Alcaraz, champion in Queens. Alexander Bublik, champion in Halle. No, this is not an old episode of Monday Match Analysis. You could think that it's 2023 and we're chatting after Halle in Queens. But no, it is 2025. But it is a repeat, the same pair of champions on this particular week in the calendar. They both win it for a second time. I cannot wait to talk about Alexander Bublik because what we saw this week was a phenomenon. And I've got some takes. But we will lead the show with Carlos Alcaraz because he is indeed the man of the moment right now in men's tennis. He extends his win streak to 18 straight matches dating back to Rome. His career record on the grass now sits at 29 wins, 3 losses. That is a win rate just a tick above 90%. And I don't think anybody needs context for how good that is, but just in case, that's Rafa Nadal's career win rate on clay. Big difference in sample size, but it's still, that's how good 29-3 is. And he does it after playing the longest Roland Garros final in Open era history, coming back from 2-0 down against the world number 1, taking a couple days to unwind in Ibiza afterwards. I think had he lost to Munar, had he lost to Rinderknecht, everybody would have given him grace, and rightly so, because it feels almost unimaginable that Alcaraz was anywhere near 100% capacity physically or mentally, but apparently that just didn't matter. And don't get me wrong, he played great tennis. His forehand was going crazy the entire week. His serve by the end of it was humming. But also, let's be realistic about the context and the circumstance. Alcaraz probably wasn't 100% here. He's just that good that he can win the title anyway, especially given his path, which was weak for a typical Queen's Club run. He beat Walton, Munar, Rinderknecht, RBA, and Lehecka in the final. Only one top 50 opponent in there. That is Lehecka, who is world number 30, I believe. Yeah. That said, plenty of things as far as what we saw to be excited about. If you are Carlos Alcaraz, if you are a fan of Carlos Alcaraz, the devil is in the details here, because on paper, a matchup against Jiri Lehecka is exactly the kind of matchup that is most dangerous for Carlos, a player who is completely suffocating with court position and pace. Off the serve, off the return, off the forehand, off the backhand. It's all gas, no brakes, no time to operate for Carlos Alcaraz. And the most important thing in these matchups, and of course Lehecka beat Alcaraz in February in Doha, and this ended up being the key to that one, the most important thing for Carlos in this kind of matchup is to deny the aggressive returning with great serving. And that is what we got here. Alcaraz hit 60% first serves unreturned and 36% second serves unreturned. And Carlos likes to joke about being a serve bot. You can joke. These are serve bot numbers. Like 60% that's what Jack Draper did when he won Stuttgart last year on that, greased lightning grass court. So like 60% and 36% second serve unreturned. Like that is, you can joke all you want. That is a serve bot statistic in conditions that certainly facilitate that kind of thing. And Lehecka with some casino returning for sure. Casino returning meaning he's standing up close on the baseline, he's leaning one way or the other, and he's swinging absolutely big. If he guesses correct and he catches it right, it's a big offensive return, and Alcaraz never really is able to even get in the point. But also, he's not going to put as many returns in play. That said, this is clearly the best Alcaraz has ever hit his slice serve. And that's the serve in his arsenal that has always come the least naturally to him. The kick was his first default serve. That's the one that he's always had. Not only has he always had it, it's always been just a really awesome kick serve. The flat serve, certainly not as good, but from a spin and trajectory standpoint, I never felt like Alcaraz had any trouble with the flat serve. He always was pretty comfortable just coming straight through the ball, like hitting it square and maxing out those miles per hours. But the slice, that was the one that he seemed to have a block on. Sometimes it would end up too flat. It just wouldn't tail. Sometimes it would end up too top spinny, which can actually be really bad when you're trying to hit a slice serve and you end up getting that like 3/4 spin. So the ball doesn't really kick and it doesn't really tail. It's not a disaster. Like, it can still be a good serve if you locate and it's got speed, but you don't want that. You want your slice serve to actually slice and ideally not to bounce as high, especially on grass. But Carlos he didn't have that ability to really come around the outside of the ball and really achieve that slider spin. Seemingly, like, it's clicked because he had it here. He had it this week. He had it against Lehecka, and there are so many advantages to it. It's a really big deal for Carlos. The obvious one is that he can drag returners off court on the deuce side, and that's the one that everybody will talk about. I think there are some more subtleties here, such as the forgiveness of the slice serve. When you hit a wide serve and you don't get the swing on the ball, you really have to marry that ball to the sideline in order to get anything out of it. When you are getting the curvature, it gives you some leeway. Suddenly, a serve where maybe you didn't tuck the ball onto the sideline, but maybe you missed 4 ball lengths inside the sideline. That can still be a hyper effective serve when your spin is actually helping you get extra width on the ball. And then the other place where my mind goes, and this has been such a big deal because we've talked about, especially against an opponent like Lehecka, Alcaraz needing to do a better job at times of just making sure that his first serve stays out of trouble, stays out of the strike zone, and that you don't get those missed spots, the missed spots that plagued him in his loss to Lehecka in Doha earlier this year, plagued him against David Goffin earlier this year, and plagued him against Novak Djokovic, particularly in the second set of that Australian Open match, where Novak was hobbling around and still crushing returns. The number one thing we were talking about as the issue when Alcaraz was, just kind of struggling his way through the first couple months of the season, relatively speaking. And it's a big deal on the second serve as well. That was an even bigger thing in the Djokovic match in Australia. He needed that slice serve against Novak, and he needed to feel comfortable enough to use it on the second so that so that he could mix it up when Djokovic was eating those kick serves for dinner. But he didn't really have that option because he wasn't comfortable enough hitting that serve. So I have court vision pulled up for those watching on YouTube. This is the Alcaraz first serve. You can see on the deuce side, he ended up hitting 55% of his first serves out wide. He only lost 1 point here. And you can see a lot of balls that he was able to be pretty precise on. But even the ones that he wasn't all that precise on, he was winning those points. And I do think that has a lot to do with the fact that what we just talked about, you can miss your spot if you get really good swing on the ball. It's going to mask the imperfection of the serve. Let's take a look at second serves. And again, what we're going to notice is that Carlos isn't hitting the kick tee on the deuce side. He's hitting it sometimes. He's hitting that 38% of the time. But 46% of the time, he's taking his second serve wide into Lehecka's forehand. And the slice serve on this grass, it stays lower and it's more difficult to attack. On the ad side, he is hitting that favorite serve. and that kicker out wide a bit more often. Actually got hurt on it I shouldn't say a few times, I should say a couple times, but more often actually going hard into Lehecka's body, particularly targeting that forehand hip of Lehecka, which was also a very effective play. He got a lot of misses going hard into the body. Average second serve speed for Alcaraz, 106 miles per hour, quite healthy. Just, in my opinion, a huge development for him that he has now proven that he has other options on the second serve on this surface, because sometimes the kicker is not going to be the best serve to go to. By the way, set point, great example of this. I'll run it on YouTube. First set point, 113 mile per hour slice serve out wide to rush Lehecka's forehand return. Serve also came up big in the first set at 4-5 down love 30. He hit 3 unreturnables and got a floating +1. The only time in the match where the serve effectiveness dipped was, incidentally, the second set tiebreak, where he only hit 1 effective first serve, and he was backed up by a few of Yiji's aggressive returns. He double faulted at 5-all, which ended up being the difference in the breaker. So that was kind of the one blip. But other than that, it was a really, really impressive serving performance from Carlos, which was the biggest key. To me, Lehecka, he looked like a guy who was trying to redline, which is not wrong at all. It's what he has to do. But there's a reason we call it redlining, which is that if you stay there for too long, your engine is going to overheat. Otherwise, it wouldn't be redlining. It would be something else. But I thought Alcaraz responded really well and managed it really well. He wasn't going to have as much control as he usually has, not against Lehecka, playing the way he was playing on this surface. But Alcaraz accepted that. He was going to make sure to put returns in play. He put far more returns in play than Lehecka did. And he did a lot of good shock absorbing, particularly deep down the middle. First set, when he broke at 5-all, he hit 1 offensive shot in this return game. And it was a second serve that Lehecka left sitting into Alcaraz's forehand, and Carlos clubbed it inside in to force the error. That was the only offensive shot Carlos hit the whole game. Third set, at 1-2, when he got the first break of serve, Alcaraz hit 0, but no offensive shots. Some solid returns up the middle, and that's pretty much it. A forehand trade up the middle that led to a Lehecka missed backhand that he put in the net. But it was 4 Lehecka errors. It was 4 balls that Carlos directed right down the center corridor of the court. Focusing on depth, focusing on consistency, and trusting that if he just hung in there with Yiji, he was going to be able to take advantage of the sloppiness as long as he was getting a volume of balls back in play, particularly in return games. Now, Alcaraz was also shading Lehecka's backhand a bit in the baseline rallies, and I would say that worked because it was the Lehecka backhand that was the leakiest ground stroke on the court. I find that shot to be pretty contact point sensitive, especially when he goes down low to get it. It doesn't always look all too reliable or stable. But also at the end of the day, he's hitting this backhand really hard at low RPMs. He's averaging 69 miles per hour on this backhand at 1,662 RPMs. So that's just a low margin profile right there. And I think Alcaraz was like, all right, well, that's the side that he probably can't stay solid on for the entire match. And there was, to me, an effort, not an extreme bias towards that wing, but definitely a noticeable bias towards going at that wing for Lehecka. Lo and behold, backhand unforced errors in this match. 19 for Lehecka, 8 for Alcaraz. So he had the advantage there. Great week for Yiji. I think I said, I forget what it was, but I said in a preview, Lehecka was outside the top 30. I made him a dark horse. And I think I said something along the lines of, I don't know when it's going to happen for Lehecka, but at some point there's going to be another really big explosive run because he's just way too good to not have these kinds of weeks. The big thing that stood out to me was how he was backing up the aggressive tennis, the big serving, the power baseline game, which is as high octane as it gets. With net rushing, there's going to be a lot of folks that say like Lehecka has no variety. And I mean, from the baseline, there's not a lot of variety. His slice backhand is a bit underdeveloped. He is willing to use it. But basically, when he's playing off the ground, he's kind of trying to smoke every ball. And in that sense, it's true. There's not much variety. But you can't accuse him of not coming forward. He does come forward. And he volleyed really well this week. So that stood out to me. But met his match against Alcaraz. I thought he had a lot of good moments in this Queens final. And the intention was there. Alcaraz served too well. He couldn't string together like enough return games where he was putting returns in play. And then there were a couple sloppy ones mixed in there, which you feel like that's inevitable when Lehecka's trying to smoke every single ball, as I just mentioned. All right, let's go to Halle. Let me start here. So I'm a buyer. Take my money, Alexander Bublik. I am bought into what we're seeing. I think Alexander Bublik is a different guy than what we have seen. He's 28 years old. We've been watching him for a long, long time. So it takes a lot for me to say this. And let me also add this. I feel like I've earned a little bit of extra credibility on this because when he won Halle 2 years ago, there was a lot of excitement around Alexander Bublik going into Wimbledon. There were some expectations. And I feel that I was on the front lines saying, whoa, whoa, whoa. Tap the brakes, everybody. It's the same Alexander Bublik. Nobody could return his serve in very serve-friendly conditions. Literally, it was just a total ace-a-thon, and he won Halle. He beat a lot of top opponents that week. He beat 14 at the time Coric, 21 Struff, 9 Sinner via retirement, 22 at the time Zverev coming back from injury, number 7 Rublev in the final. This week, he beats world number 1 Sinner, 23 Mahac, 22 Khachanov, 11 Medvedev. So he is now 9-0 against top 25 opponents in Halle. But in 2023, it was all the serve. And I watched those matches and I said, folks, I just don't think that is anything sustainable or repeatable. Nobody could return his serve all week long. He just totally served on another planet. That was that. Probably not a formula for future success. This time around, I feel pretty strongly that Bublik has unlocked something. And I'm not saying it's permanent, but it appears more than temporary. I feel like he's unlocked something, and that something is a high-margin, aggressive forehand that has made him a completely different animal from the baseline. I would go as far to say that Alexander Bublik as a baseliner is unrecognizable from his previous self. So let's go back. What was he? Well, he was a soft hitter, a counter-punching baseliner without above-average movement, or a hard hitter without reliability, a guy who could flatten out and hit big, but he would always be erratic because he didn't have that within himself. And he could, sometimes fluctuate wildly between the two. But as a server, awesome. As a net rusher, awesome. The drop shots, they're always great. But the bread and butter, the foundation of his baseline game, drive forehands, drive backhands, but mostly the forehand in my view, it wasn't there. Like the fundamentals just were not there compared to his peers. And it was not a formula that was going to bring him like any kind of success from the baseline, which is why he wasn't going to break serve. What is he now? What has he looked like? Not just last week in Halle. But also, I saw glimpses of it throughout clay court season, starting in Phoenix. And then it exploded at Roland Garros with the quarterfinal run. What is it now? Right now, what it looks like is a legitimately good power baseliner with the elite net rushing, with the drop shots. It's like giving Benoit Paire a elite forehand and saying, go nuts. That's what it's like right now. Look at the break of serve in the first set at 3-4. He didn't use any, there was no net rushing. There was no finesse. It was all brute force. At love all, Bublik's hitting a neutral forehand from 7 feet behind the baseline. He stings it against the grain down the line for a forced error. It was a really aggressive decision, but it looked totally in control. At love 15, he sits on a forehand, first serve return, takes a big swing, catches a nice inside-out angle. Medvedev floats some backhand slice defense, and Bublik finishes with a forehand inside out. This one was a little different from the others because he hit a big return. At love 30, Bublik went to the block return just to start the point, and then on the next ball, he hit a running forehand, lightly running, from 8 feet behind the baseline, and he just absolutely walloped it. Cross court, deep, forces the error off of the baseline. Depth and pace, just pure depth and pace to force the error. And positionally, I mean, again, 8 feet behind the baseline. And Medvedev is in position, and he's finding a finish with just raw quality. Love 40, deep block return. Next ball, backhand down the line winner, frozen rope on the two-hander. As sweet a strike as you'll ever see. So again, what was this break? This break was creating lethal damage from behind the baseline against an elite defender. It was taking Daniil out of his own service points, early in his own service points, with vicious ground stroke power. And this just was not really a part of the Alexander Bublik experience previously. This was part of a run, and just to underscore and highlight how well he played, this was part of a run of 12 points in a row in the opening set, where he was down love 30 at 3-4, and he won the next 12 points in a row to win the set. And Medvedev made 0 unforced errors over the course of those 12 points. Not even really any borderline unforced errors. Trust me, I'm not just being kind with the scoring. That's just one game. Here's what the stats say. Baseline points won. Bublik's 52-week average is 46%. That's a pretty horrendous number. The tour average is, as you would guess, 50%. Okay, that's your average baseline points won. This week, Bublik played Sinner and Medvedev, and he was at 51% baseline points won. Forehand quality. Bublik's average 7.0. Tour average 7.5. It comes as no shock to me whatsoever that Bublik's forehand quality, his Tennis Insights forehand quality, is below tour average. It comes as no surprise to me. This week, 8.2. He's well above tour average. By the way, similar on the backhand, but I've just never felt that the backhand was as problematic for Bublik. And the variety is so much better now because he sets it up in combination. And this is a massive part of fighting vernacular. Like if you watch boxing or MMA, you'll hear this kind of stuff all the time. I think it's relevant in tennis. So you'll hear in boxing MMA that you can't just throw your most effective strike naked. If your right straight is your best punch, you can't just walk in there and throw a right straight naked. Your opponent's looking for it. They can counter it. They see it's coming. They know what to do. It's too easy. You have to hide it. You have to set it up with combinations, feints, fakes, other shots, other sorts of strikes. That way, when you throw the right straight, you've put your opponent in a position where they are vulnerable to it. so that it can actually land. And I think it's the same point when it comes to drop shots, certainly, net rushing to some extent as well, where you have to use the power game, or at least it's a huge help if you can use the power game to soften up your opponent before you go to those other options. Look at the set point here. Look at the set point that Bublik saved in the second set. I want to go shot by shot here. So first off of the serve, aggressive footwork to find the forehand, goes hard inside out. Doesn't do big damage on this ball, but it does draw a slow reply. And that's because of the aggression that Bublik applied. On the next ball, backhand cross court, Bublik belts it hard and deep. Medvedev has to be careful not to make an error off of a ball this good. So Daniil's backhand cross court lands central. Bublik runs around, winds up his forehand. Medvedev skirts backwards here. He is scared of Sasha Bublik's forehand power. And how do I know he was scared of it? His feet told me that story. He is backing up on the drop shot guy. Alexander Bublik is getting guys to back up on his forehand. And there have been times where I've watched Bublik and there is zero threat of the drive forehand, that he's just bailing out into the drop shot right away constantly because he has no ability to drive that ball. And opponents don't have to respect that option. So you're just getting drop shot after drop shot after drop shot, and it's just a lack of confidence. And this is the exact opposite, because time and time again in this match against Medvedev, Bublik actually earned Daniil's respect enough to back him up, which opens up the drop shots and opens up the net approaches because there's more court to volley into, more time to close the net, and more time to react to the ball off the passing shot. All right, other points. No modified return position from Medvedev in this match, as we've often seen, meaning Daniil on the grass usually does move up a bit. Against Bublik, he decided, I'm going to stay back, maybe because of just how big and deadly Bublik's serve is. Bublik had some really good answers to this. He saved a break point in the opening game with what looked to me like an intentional weak slice serve, very slow, that actually got down to Medvedev's ankles, and then Bublik followed it up with a drop shot finish. That was more of a one-off. What I was seeing over and over again is Sasha was using the slice serve far more often than usual to get the ball to swing away from Medvedev, especially on the deuce side. And the deep return position is going to open that up because the ball is traveling further, and therefore it is tailing. It has more time to tail further and further off the court. Stats for the tournament: Bublik was 56% first serves unreturned, which is great, but not that surprising for Bublik in these particular conditions. Second serve, 28 unreturned versus 20 double faults. So the aggression on the second serve and how big he's hitting it, mostly paying off because, anything above 50% is basically something that you're going to take on a second serve. And even in the free points battle, forget all the short balls and the attacks that he could generate with the aggressive second serves. Even if you just look at the free points, his second serve is doing more good than it is harm. That's all I've got on the Bublik side of things. I just think when he is hitting off the ground with this kind of clarity and this sort of intention, the offensive barrage is entirely overwhelming for anybody. And Halle conditions help for sure. There's no doubt about that. But again, if he's going to bring a power baseline, a consistent power baseline style to this stuff, and you tack on the serve and you tack on all the stuff he does with his hands and his net rushing, it's absurd. It's absurdly good. And the question is, how sustainable is it? But I definitely think it goes way further than the tropes that you may hear about Bublik being more focused or more motivated or being more calm. Like, no, stylistically, like the things he's doing technically on the court with his forehand, much bigger acceleration, much better RPM, new racket, the Babolat Pure Arrow. Like, all of these things to me are making a way bigger difference than whatever like psychological improvement he's made, because like, newsflash, it's pretty easy to look calm and focused when you're playing awesome tennis, which is what Bublik has been doing in his past 2 tournaments. This Medvedev run, look, it's hard to feel positive when Daniil makes a final at this point and doesn't get it done in the end, because this title drought has gotten so bad for Medvedev. Still looking for his first title in now over 2 years. Got to go back to Rome 2023. But I just don't think there's all that much shame in losing to Bublik the way he was playing this week at all. I will say this. The 2 underlying issues that we've discussed with Medvedev: lack of serve damage and struggles with offense off the ground. Those are the 2 things we've highlighted. These conditions are a handicap for those things. And Medvedev, if you look at the return and the defense, these things are still performing at a high level. Medvedev in 2025, 8th highest break rate on tour, better than Jack Draper, better than Lorenzo Musetti, better than Alexander Zverev, better than Novak Djokovic. He is breaking serve more often than all those guys. He doesn't need help breaking. He needs help holding. That's where Stuttgart is, again, going to be a handicap. And Daniil ended up holding 54 out of 56 service games, but also give him some credit, not just the conditions. He served better this week. Serve quality, according to Tennis Insights, was up 8.6 was his serve quality. Last 52 weeks, it's an 8.0. And you could say, well, don't the conditions help bump that number up? Yes, they do. But if you look at the raw materials, average speed, 125 miles per hour this week, up from 123. 2 mile per hour jump, not insignificant. If you look at the location, on average, a little bit tighter to the sidelines. Distance from the sidelines was down slightly, which means accuracy improved, but percentage in was also up. 61% average, 68% in Halle. So there's good evidence that he had a good serving week, conditions aside. I was not surprised that he beat Zverev. In this head-to-head, height of bounce, backhand to backhand, I think has always been a major factor, a huge deal. Don't think Zverev... I think Zverev hates Daniil's ball because it doesn't jump up into his strike zone. And it's the same reason why grass has been Zverev's worst surface by far. So when you combined grass and the things that Medvedev does with height of bounce always, I just don't think it's a comfortable matchup for Zverev. But also, Sasha, I will say, we've talked about width on the serve. We've talked about it with Alcaraz because he's seemingly kind of developed a slice serve for the first time. And we've talked about it with Bublik because he was hitting it really well against Medvedev, who was standing on the back fence. Zverev doesn't get great width on his serve. As much as it's an elite serve, that part of it is not. And then the other thing I want to mention, we've had so many concerns about Daniil's identity, but against a familiar opponent who doesn't play all that disruptive, it seemed to clarify things for Medvedev. Daniil seemed to be very comfortable in all the choices he was making in rally. And he was sharp and he was consistent. And I thought there was a good balance of applying pressure, but staying rock solid. And that has been another thing that's kind of eluded Medvedev at times, especially on the offensive baseline side of things. Medvedev now has won 7 of the last 8 in that head-to-head. One more thing I've got to say about Medvedev, there's a certain clutch factor lacking. So in Hertogenbosch, He was in a second set tiebreak against Opelka. He had 2 double faults all match long. He doubles 3 times in a row. None of them close double faults, all of them ugly. In fact, the last one was a flat first serve that he missed in the middle of the net. So a total meltdown against Opelka there on the serve. This time in the second set tiebreak, not as bad, not as egregious, still not great. He was up a mini break 4-3, +1 backhand, inside out, hit the net tape for an unforced error. Kind of trying to guide the ball into a tough target. I didn't hate this miss, to be honest. Definitely an unforced error, but I didn't hate this miss. Really tight, top of the net tape. But then when you look at the fact that on the next point, backhand rally, Bublik just locks it down. Cross court, no drop shot. Nothing irresponsible. And Medvedev pulls the trigger down the line, catches it late, sprays it into the alley, wide, unforced error. So now we're looking at back-to-back backhand unforced errors from Medvedev in crunch time. Like, that's just the kind of thing, man. Like, I just don't know if 2019 through 2022 Medvedev is doing that pretty much ever. Bublik, 5-4, serve, backhand cross-court approach, low forehand volley from behind the service line, perfectly feathered, short cross-court, drop volley winner. Chef's kiss. Chef's kiss. I mean, this is what he's doing. And again, like, he's not forcing his way to the net with like a weak, measly approach. He's backing up his skills with his ground game, his finesse skills. And then championship point, we get that slider out wide, serve and volley. It ends up being a service winner. If he had to hit a volley, he would have had plenty of court to hit into. And that did it for Alexander Bublik. Really stunning stuff from Sasha. In 2023, I was not buying it. I did not see him as a threat at Wimbledon. In 2025, I do. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.